Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everybody, and welcome to Pangolin, the conservation podcast, the show dedicated to exploring and amplifying the world's underappreciated conservation stories. The stories that inspire me, and I hope will inspire you too. I'm your host, Jack Baker, and welcome to another episode of our Pangolin Pride celebration, where we are highlighting amazing stories from the LGBTQ community about all of the amazing, incredible work that they do in the nature and conservation space. I am so excited today because I am not just bringing you one, I'm bringing you two incredible, amazing guests, the wonderful Aspen Ellis and Allison Payne from the University of California, Santa Cruz. Aspen works on seabirds, Allison works on elephant seals and other marine mammals, and together they are teaching an incredible course on queer ecologies, which I'm so excited to learn more about. So thank you, first of all, so much for joining me, Aspen and Allison. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. We're so excited to be here.
No, it's absolutely my pleasure, and yes, I'm so grateful to both of you for showing up for and talking about your work. I think, and I will highlight to the listeners, they have gotten up at the crack of dawn to do this, so thank you so much. The time difference has worked very well in my favor, so thank you so much for being here. I guess I always do those introductions where there is these are the people. Here is what you would read in their bio on LinkedIn or on the university website or whatever. But I always think you guys know yourself far better than I do. So I wondered if you wanted to introduce yourself to the listeners, let them know kind of a little bit about who you are, what you do. Is anyone feeling particularly confident to go first, or should I? Allison, you smiled first, so I think that means you have to go first. I'm sorry.
Sounds good to me. Thank you so much, Jack. My name is Allison Payne. I'm a PhD candidate in ecology and evolutionary biology at UC Santa Cruz. And I've spent pretty much the last decade researching marine mammals in California after getting my start as a naturalist on a whale watching boat out of San Francisco. So going out and seeing whales under the Golden Gate Bridge every day. And now I work with elephant seals as a part of a long-term study at Año Nuevo State Park, which is in Central California. And there's a long-term study there that's been going on since the 1960s. So I'm contributing to that and working with those data as part of my dissertation.
Amazing. And probably what stage I'm going to be, because I'm also doing a PhD. I'm wondering what stage are we at? Are we in the stress stage? Are we in the fun stage? Where are we in this process of PhDing?
Aspen and I are actually in the same cohort. So we started our PhDs together and we're both in the fourth year and trying to finish in the next year or so. So that is, for me, I'm very excited. I just got a bunch of really exciting data back after years of failure. So I would say I'm in an exciting stage. Yeah.
That's good. That's a good place to be. I think I think I'm also currently sitting on one of those highs of I'm in the middle of field work where I'm this is the best part. This is the fun bit where I'm getting all of the data, talking to people, doing things. Yep, absolutely the best part. Aspen, I wonder, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, for sure. I'm Aspen. I'm also a PhD candidate. Like Allison said, we're in the same cohort. Before coming to grad school, I also spent 10 years working as a biologist across the US, but my love was seabirds from super early on. So I got really lucky, and before I was even in undergrad, I started working with seabirds on a remote colony in the Gulf of Maine and spent a lot of time then just really interested in doing that work and bouncing all over the US doing it. So I would typically work in these kind of massive breeding colonies where you've got thousands of birds concentrated on a 2-acre island, and it's just you and one other biologist, and you're out there studying them. And I really loved how immersive that work was and got to learn a huge amount doing it. But at the same time, it really is super intense to be able to kind of hop between those field sites year after year. And I really, I think what I eventually found is that it became difficult in a lot of the work I was doing, like Allison is contributing to these long-term monitoring projects. And it can be really hard to sort of be logging the impacts of climate change year after year. And eventually what I found is that like seeing that and feeling so powerless to it every year meant that I wanted to take a little bit of a career shift and come back to grad school to sort of work on the climate change issue more directly. So I'm now kind of trying to apply that experience as a seabird biologist to developing renewable energy, and how we can develop that in a more sustainable way for wildlife populations. So that's most of the focus of what I work on now.
That's a really interesting transition of like, yeah, going from one to the other and being like, yeah, and like I really respect that kind of like, and I think it's something we need to get a lot better at within kind of these kind of spaces is going like, my mental health or my kind of work, I'm going to be good and productive, I'm going to have to shift somewhere else. Just for, even if you end up back at the seabird colonies for a bit, we're going to do something different that's still productive, still kind of in the same world, but like doing something else. And that's, yeah, big respect for making the healthy choice, because most people I feel like just keep plowing forward. So that's like, yeah.
Yeah, and I miss it so much, but at the same time,
Mhm.
it was not super sustainable for my well-being. So it's nice to be able to kind of keep still doing it while I've pivoted.
Yeah, that's really amazing. That's really, yeah, it's really really interesting, and I kind of get the impact part of it, and like looking, because when I my PhD is looking at how impact is created from like a human centered perspective within one organization, and going like, what are the steps and what are the processes that people go through to create impact, whatever that means in conservation kind of work. And like at the start of the PhD, it was like, do you want to study the impact that's created or the impact is created? And I went, that's going to take a long time, and that's a very long study. I have funding for however many years. We're going to do the
Yeah.
pre-studying of how it's made, because no, that's really really interesting. And I guess like we're here to talk about queer ecologies, and you kind of talked a little bit about your work, but like I wondered like in a little bit more specific before we move on, because I think like these are both topics that on another series at another time, if you were here by yourselves, would be entire episodes just of their own. And I wondered, like, what are some of the projects you're working on now in terms of the kind of renewables and things? That sounds really interesting.
Yeah. So essentially, what I'm working on is offshore wind energy. A lot of the work I was doing before I came to grad school, like I was saying, is like super remote on these islands without internet or running water. And now, unfortunately, for the most part, I'm in stark contrast, stuck behind a computer. Um, but the conservation problem itself is really interesting to me. Offshore wind energy, I'm sure you know from the UK, is a really key piece of current plans to move towards a more sustainable energy production future. Um, but there's a lot of conversation around like what the immediate impacts of that will be on ecosystems. We're moving a whole bunch of human development into a very like undeveloped historically place. Like the offshore environment, we have so much like so little human infrastructure compared to onshore. And so a lot of people are concerned about like what all of that new development will mean for wildlife. But we need to move that energy forward in order to work towards this long-term climate change goal, and that's such a big impact on seabirds right now. So trying to figure out how we can balance that of like, well, we need this development, but it's going to have some impact, how do we mitigate that, is what I'm focusing on. And there's a lot that you can do to help with that, like trying to pick like strategic places for the facilities and trying to do lighting changes or whatever else to be able to reduce like collisions with birds, for example. But we knew that there's like a huge amount of uncertainty over what the impacts will be, and we've got to move development forward quite quickly. So we suspect there's going to be some we can't prevent, especially in the immediate term. And a lot of my work now focuses on kind of trying to reduce that uncertainty, but then also be able to help industry and policymakers figure out how we can use funding from offshore wind energy to like funnel towards existing seabird conservation issues. So things like using funding from offshore wind energy to be able to reduce invasive species on breeding colonies, for example. So you can like boost the populations enough to offset that residual impact. And I'm trying to make sure that like we're doing that in a way where we can actually track that it's happening and that it's like good to go and actually making the differences we need for seabird populations. So a lot of my work now is around that offsetting piece.
I am always amazed when people talk about their work, especially when it's like, because I'm like, those are two separate PhDs altogether. Like you have really like that says so much, but so interesting. And like, yeah, that's really, really interesting. And I like that link, right? Between like, oh, we're not just making the production more kind of safe or more for these animals. Also, if we can do that and the funding can go to the right places, you can kind of counteract the impacts, the negative impacts that inevitably maybe might happen with those things. Like That's really, really interesting. And like,
And it's
yeah.
cool having like done a lot of that hands-on conservation work myself for the past 10 years
Mhm.
to now be able to potentially to channel a huge amount of funding towards being able to do it better and longer moving forward. So it's nice to at least be able to apply that pretty directly to the work I'm doing now.
Yeah, yeah, that must be quite a surreal kind of like, oh, I was facing these issues myself, and now I might be coming up with some of the potential solutions, or at least part of the solutions, or part of like that's amazing. That's really,
Yeah,
really
find some
interesting.
wood to knock on, but fingers crossed. Yeah.
Yep, yep. I'm the table here is there. We go. That's wood. There we go. Um, yep. No, that's amazing. And then Allison, I don't know what. So yeah, a little bit more about your work would also be interesting. I mean, I and Aspen, at some point, I will come back to you for a full podcast just about that. Probably, maybe once you're finished, to not add too much
Yep.
to your plate. Once you're done, and like a whenever you're done, we'll come back. And then Allison, I'm sure I'm about to say the same thing to you. But yeah, do you want to tell us a little bit more about your work?
Sure. So most of my work is on elephant seals, and elephant seals are incredible animals because they spend most of their lives down in the twilight zone. So, like 1,000 meters or more underwater, under crushing pressure in total darkness. But unlike all of the other animals that live down there, they come onto the beach twice a year, which gives us a bunch of opportunities to track and measure them and learn about all of the deep, dark ocean. And so, especially during the breeding season, but also when they molt, there are hundreds of seals that pack onto the beach just 25 minutes up the road from our university. And there's these huge, like up to 2,000 kilogram males who have raging hormones just slamming into each other, fighting over control of the beach. The females are all giving birth and like screaming at each other, and the pups are all snapping. It's like a very wild experience for being so close to home. Um, so people have been going there from UCSC. The Beltran lab, the Costa lab, have been going there to look at elephant seal demography and movement and ecology and physiology for a really long time. And so one of the coolest things I think about working on those long-term projects is just all of the doors that opens for the kinds of questions you can answer. So for one example, I work with a lot of undergrads and take them into the field. And we have a field course. I'm teaching it this year. This is my fourth time being involved with it. And every year we take 14 undergrads into the field. They get fieldwork experience, they do a project, and then we publish a paper at the end. And it's a really cool experience for them to really be involved with research and to kind of get a chance to tackle those big scientific questions by having access to that long-term data. And my dissertation is focused on acoustics, actually. So I've instrumented a seal with an acoustic recorder, and we recorded the sounds of the deep ocean from the back of an elephant seal. And she recorded other animals like whales and dolphins and some ship noise and things like that. So that's my new exciting data. So stay tuned for whatever will be found in there.
That is fascinating, and I feel like that would be the type of thing where I would, even once you finish studying it while I'm working or something, just put it on in the background of like just to stay focused instead of classical music that's meant to make you study, like the deep ocean sound. I don't know what it
Yeah.
like. Just to I don't know, maybe relate. It was when you were talking about the like they exist for most of the year in the crushing darkness. I was like, yep, relatable content there, especially here in Scotland, where like. Yep, yep, yep. They go out onto the beach twice a year. Like, yeah, I'm like we've had a sunny spell here in Scotland, and that's why I'm slightly pinker than normal. Because yeah, it's every second there's 2 days we're out and about. But no, that's a really interesting one, and like especially with like the teaching aspect, right? Because like that must be really exciting, really valuable. I've run so as part of my course, I've demonstrated on courses that have gone to Belfast and Athens and done kind of human geography kind of teaching in those cities. And like it's always amazing to see how students connect with things so much better when it's in front of them, right? There's stuff that you can read and there's papers you can read and you can listen to like you can find that it's all there, but like seeing the light bulb moments as things switch on. I don't know if I'd feel confident. Like I trust those students. I don't know if I'd feel confident taking them to somewhere with what was it? How many kilograms male seals?
Yeah,
Like,
the 2,000.
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, Yeah, Belfast was enough, I feel like, and there's no, I feel like the biggest thing we saw in Belfast was like a robin or a crow or something. So, um, but no, that's fantastic. That's really amazing. And like, yeah, I am gonna have to at some point ask you back because elephant seals, I think, deserve. Yeah, because even in what you're saying, like I feel like they are often the stars of these documentaries and things, right? Where they get popped up because they are big and exciting and aggressive and there's a lot of that action. But like I feel like there's probably a deeper story there rather than just the, oh, look at the two big boys fighting at each other. Like there's got to be something more. There's obviously a lot more there. So that's no, that's really interesting. I guess then that kind of leads a little bit with the teaching aspect into like maybe how you two have kind of been leading this course. And so I suppose like, yeah, for people who don't know, we're here to talk about queer ecologies, and the two of you have been running a course in queer ecologies. And I think, yeah, I was really excited because I think that's such an interesting topic. It's something that throughout my entire university career have only, I think, once encountered a course that taught anything remotely like that. So when this kind of opportunity came up to speak to, I was like, I'm intrigued to know where that idea came from and how it developed and these things. I guess before we get into it exactly, like, it's a hard thing to summarize, I suppose, because it's so big and you have designed a whole course around it. So we could be here presumably for many lectures worth of things. But like, how would you describe like queer ecologies to people who don't know what that is and have never maybe encountered it before? Or I don't know who's the one who does the intro lecture. I don't know, like.
Yeah, totally. So queer ecology, like you said, it's a really big term. So to start off, I feel that we usually break it down into its parts. So for ecology, we're thinking about the study of the relationships between living organisms and their environment and all of the different connections that we have between plants and animals and the world around them. And then we also use Bell Hook's definition of queer as being not about who you're having sex with, but about the self that's at odds with everything around it, and it has to invent and create and find a place to speak and to live and to thrive. And we feel like those actually go really well together.
Yeah, we define queer ecology for our course with our students as a way of looking at the world that then decenters these traditional narratives from kind of science's history about what is natural. And we try to leave a lot more room to imagine a lot more modes of existence. And we use those perspectives to try and come closer to biological reality, but also to make science itself a safer place for queer people. And think about how science changes and improves when you've got more perspectives doing the science and what legacy that leaves for the next generation.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's incredible. I think, yeah, it's one of those things that once you learn about it and once you start to think about it, it's like, yes, I feel like this is the way that it changes everything. And I think a good example was kind of last year. I think it was Christine. I think mentioned about the fact that lemurs, for example, had been studied as patriarchal, like a patriarchal species for as long as it was until a woman looked at lemurs and went, "You've been wrong this entire time," and changes these dynamics, right? And the kind of way that shift of perspective shifts everything and can shift everything and has so much potential is so interesting. I wonder, is there any like examples that you two like to give where you're like, here's something that like was defined, was the narrative that like people went by, and now because of just this slightly, is there one that like, I don't know, speaks to you most, or when people ask?
Do you want to talk about salmon, Aspen?
I'm always
Yeah,
interested in salmon.
we were teaching this example in our course this year. There's a really cool new book out, Feminism in the Wild, right? Is that the name of it? But in that book, they talk about this example of kind of traditional perspectives of coho salmon, I think it is, where it's one of these like mating structures where you've got multiple different male types, where you've got these sort of like traditional like sneaker males, as they're often described, and then these like larger, more aggressive, more territorial males. And the traditional lens has been that there's like these preferred males who defend the territory and are like attracting the females. And then there's sneaker males that might come in and try and like steal fertilizations of eggs basically from the dominant males. But there's like a similar perspective, or a flipped perspective, I suppose, that has sort of similar data to back it, which is that the preferred males that entire time are the sneakers themselves, and that it's these sort of like bully males that are actually establishing like or like stealing these mate potentials from the sneakers. Um, and it's not to say that like one answer is right or the other isn't. I think it's more interesting to think about this example in terms of like, well, so far we don't know the answer. We don't know which like type the females prefer, but that actually does have implications for how conservation is done in terms of like how you're managing those salmon populations and how you're doing that in fisheries, for examples. Um, and it's just like this sort of dominant lens that we have had as people of like what masculinity should be or what it should look like, that we're then applying to this system, and it's making it difficult for people like, when we're applying that human lens onto a system to actually ask the question from sort of the system's point of view. And it can just be the case that like this story gets reperpetuated and then people end up studying that hypothesis enough that these other stories that are less like dominant in terms of the human narrative just get missed. So thinking about trying to broaden out that lens, I think in all sorts of examples, but the salmon's just one of them, has been really interesting and has been a great exploration that we've done with the students as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think it's a really good example, right? It's a really, really interesting example. And yeah, you mentioned the students there, and I wonder like this is not the two of you kind of studying this out of interest. You're not just kind of doing that, you're also teaching it, and kind of I wonder how that kind of collaboration, because it does like the way that the work that you're doing, right? That term never appeared to like, we didn't talk about queer ecology and the specifics to the work that you're doing. So I wondered, how did the two of you kind of find each other, go, this is something we're both interested in, and it's important now to kind of start teaching it. Like how did this course come about?
Yeah, it was Allison's idea first, so I'll let her take it off.
So when I first started my PhD, I was really thinking of my queer identity and my science identity as really separate from each other. And the kind of value systems and the things that each taught me felt radically different. So science felt like it was teaching me to seek objective truth and to always be unbiased and that kind of thing. And at the same time, being queer and being in queer communities really taught me to be radically skeptical about every structure and everything that is imposed on us. And so queerness really taught me to look for places where injustices were disguised as an objective truth and an objective reality. And it was really liberating to try to bring that to science and bring that to my research. I wanted to see science through a queer lens and wonder what we could break down and what we were taking for granted. And this seems a little silly now, but like figured one way to learn would be to teach and to build that curriculum ourselves. And that was a really exciting idea. I'm like definitely a big picture, like always have some scheme kind of person. So I was like, okay, I need someone who is down to earth, someone who can make things happen. Who do I know who could do that? And so I schemed to get Aspen involved, I bought her a beer, laid out the plan, and somehow she agreed.
Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, I guess, yeah. Well, I was going to say, Aspen, what was your take on that? Like, were you just like, oh no, this is going to be a lot of work, or was it like, oh, actually, this is a really good idea? Like,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, when Allison first came to me, I think it really surprised me. Let's see, it was probably only 5 months into our PhDs, maybe, when that idea came to you, Allison. So it was really early in our program.
Mm-hmm. It had been cooking.
It had been cooking, yes. So I think, I mean, for me, like Allison, I think in some ways, before my PhD, my field work like moved me around a lot, and living in those small teams that I was working with in like really remote areas, it just meant that I didn't get a lot of say over the kind of community that I was a part of. It was just like my coworkers in these tiny camps. And so it wasn't really until I started my PhD that I actually got to feel a part of queer community for the first time and see what it was like to actually be actively in queer culture. And even though that was a strongly held part of my personal identity, that's not a way that I was connecting to other people or relating to people in my community before I started here in Santa Cruz. And so when Allison brought this idea to me, as that was sort of happening for me for the first time in the first year of my program, it really excited me for a lot of reasons. For one, I think just because we were like grad student babies at that point. The idea that you could just have a good idea and then turn it into a class was mind blowing to me. It's like, wow, would love to do that. But also, I think beyond that, just like seeing it as an opportunity for me to actually have an active space to connect my queerness to the work that I was doing felt like a huge opportunity. And then getting to use that course to make that connection and community happen earlier in the careers for a lot of students that we had meant a lot to me. Being able to actually start that connection and make their identities part of their work and their own like identities as scientists earlier in their career than that had happened for me seemed like a really exciting opportunity.
I think and it's such an important, it's so wonderful for you as a personal journey, but also for providing that for the students and creating that space, right? Because I don't like, my undergrad was in international relations, which is very old textbooks, certain ways of talking about things, certain ways of doing things, right? And then you kind of move into masters, and even then it was kind of, I did an interdisciplinary master's in conservation, which dived into kind of geography and biology and international relations again, and all of these kind of spaces. But by only just kind of dipping into those spaces, right, you learn what are the main kind of historical arguments that those kind of places have taught. And then by the time you get to PhD, those views are so deeply ingrained in your own brain of like, this is the way we view the world, this is the way we study the world, these are the knowledges that I have that I can use to explain the world. The parts of you that go, well, actually, there's a big part of me that isn't represented in any of this, but is that valid? Does that mean it's not valid? Has anyone else thought about this? Like, it becomes so great that you kind of write yourself out and perpetuate this problem of like, oh, we just are going to keep viewing the world in the same way, because why would I, like, oh, it's clear someone must have done this before. It's like this, I'm just not present, right? So it's so important, giving that kind of equipping people with that lens and that knowledge and that confidence that they can go, yeah, this is me, or this is just a different way of viewing the world, or and it doesn't even have to be, I was gonna say, it doesn't have to be queer people or LGBTQ plus people, or any, like, just giving everybody that breadth of knowledge must be so interesting. I wonder, like, what has it been like? I know you said that this was kind of the start, it was early in your program, this was like the start of a journey. What was it like setting that up and like engaging students in this? I imagine they were probably quite excited, but like, what was that process like?
Yeah, it was interesting. And also, I mean, as early PhD students and setting up a course that has never been taught before, like all of those processes to get a department on board with you teaching a course as well, like we had to kind of sell this to the department. And I think we feel very lucky to be in a place in a department that is willing to house our scheme. But yeah, we initially, I think, for a number of reasons, partially because it's what the department was like able to get on board with, but we set the course up as sort of a 2-credit seminar style course, and planned for it for about a year before we actually taught it. But we were excited about the seminar setup, in part because, as Allison and I are both kind of 2 white queer women, we really wanted to find ways for the students to learn from a broader set of queer lived experiences than just our own. And so having it as a seminar style course where we're sort of facilitating a space for those conversations to happen, but students are hearing queer perspectives from all sorts of folks with all sorts of different backgrounds, has been really nice. And we've learned a huge amount and also built a lot of queer community ourselves in being able to teach it that way. So I think it's meant a lot to both of us to be able to have it be a much more collaborative experience than a traditional class style.
Yeah, and I think the speakers all interpret queer ecology through their own lenses, and that is really, I think, a nice way to explore it. So Christine Wilkinson, your former podcast guest, she comes to our class and talks about the vilification of nature based on human values, which she really sees in all of her work between humans and urban wildlife, like hyenas and coyotes. But we also have people come and talk about, the surprising sexual behaviors of spiders and the power of data and open science and how to kind of reduce the invasiveness of certain research on animals, like animal welfare conversations and science communication. And there are queer lenses to view all of these things through. And it's been really exciting to see how that resonates for students.
I think that's, sorry, Aspen?
I was just going to say it's cool too to like now have had sort of the curriculum solidified over the course of the last 3 times teaching it, thanks to everyone bringing what is important to them about queer ecology to the course. And now we sort of have these dominant themes that we can say, okay, this is a really important conversation to have with our undergrads, but we didn't come up with that independently. It just is sort of like polling polling the body of queer scientists that are in our community and then being able to co-develop that.
Mhm. No, that's fantastic. I think that's the nice thing about like building this community, right? Is like last year, when I started doing this as a series, I was kind of like, okay, I need to find people to speak. And then you have that thought of like, hang on, who am I going to ask to speak? Where are these people? Where, like, because they're all there and they're all amazing and it's all happening. But some people talk about it less. Some people don't like to talk about it as much. Some people do. Some people want to. Some people are just nervous to be recorded and these things. But then actually getting people to sit down, have these conversations. For like, I feel like for me, and I guess it's been a similar experience for you, is like I feel like I have grown so much just in learning these things, and I've also been like challenged in a way where I've been like, not in a rude way, never in a like, but like checked and been like, hang on, this is your experience of the world. My experience is similar, but I have this also to kind of deal with, or this kind of question, or that kind of thing. And also just it's probably, I imagine if you have a set of speakers, like for me, it's like finding those heroes that you never had before. And now these people who like you get to interact with, and like there's people now I still message having had on the podcast last year on whatever platform it is, going like, they're my friends, but they're also like my heroes of like, these are people doing amazing, incredible things that deserve all this. So that it must be so justifying as well of like having all of those people in the space is it must be
Yeah, it's so
fantastic.
cool. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's amazing. And just getting to shout about your friends always and put them in front of students must be, yep, incredible. I guess like, yeah, like, so how are so that's, it's kind of like nice. That's exciting to hear that it's kind of built kind of up well, like there's amazing people. Like, what has the student response been like to that? Have you seen these kind of light bulb moments of people changing and going, hang on, this reflects me, or this changes the way I see something else? Like, what has it been like to kind of see those responses?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been really exciting. And I think because we just came up with this idea ourselves and weren't sure how it was going to land, it was really important for us. And Allison had the great idea to just build in a lot of opportunities for feedback throughout the class. So we've got like anonymous feedback forms and daily reflections and end of quarter feedback, etc. So we've got
Mm-hmm.
luckily now a lot of information we can pull from and then also come to the department with and say, hey, this is actually really important to the students. And I think a lot of like what we hear from students throughout the quarter and then also just like, moving forward in their careers is that for them, in part, like a lot of the community that they get from other undergrads is hugely important. Like seeing their identities as something that they can connect with folks through in their actual field, and having a space for that really early has meant a huge amount to students. And then also seeing sort of this like upward community of being able to see what that looks like in the next career stage and see that there is a space for you moving forward from the seminar speakers and grad students in the course has meant a lot as well. I think that that has given a lot of students like a sense of a future and a place for them within the field moving forward. And I think also just like talking about these issues and talking about these kind of complex like interplays of identity and the science and the history of science has meant that a lot of students have said that the course has kind of fundamentally shifted their outlook on science. And like you were saying earlier, just have given them more capacity to question what science has been presented as or how science is done from a much earlier point in their careers than I think I at least got the chance to. Um, so I think it's been really exciting to see that. I think it's let students engage a lot more critically with the field and then also just feel like they belong in it at a much earlier stage.
Yeah, I think one thing that the course really emphasizes is how science is always political, even when we're not thinking about it, and even when we think that we're being objective. And so, for a lot of students, this is their first time learning about some of the foundations of ecology and how closely our foundations and in ecology and then other STEM fields are entwined with politics, things like ideology around eugenics. So things like Ronald Fisher is one of the like biggest names in ecology and in statistics, and super influential, and was a staunch supporter of eugenics. Had really close ties to Nazi eugenicists scientists and geneticists. And so having some honest conversations about the origins of our field is a really serious and powerful discussion to have. And I think the students value it because it's not something that we typically talk about in our STEM courses or acknowledge even. So I think it's nice to be able to have that as biologists, and especially in today's world, I think that's a good way to kind of acknowledge our history and the biases that are baked in.
Yeah. And I think it's been interesting and complicated to talk about that with the students too, especially now in the US where there's a lot of anti-science rhetoric and it feels like we kind of have to defend science in a lot of ways. Then having those conversations and saying, like, science isn't perfect either. This objectivity idea is a myth in a lot of ways, and thinking about how identity and bias play into the science that is done and who it serves can be tricky, I think, for a lot of people to engage with. But I think those discussions can also be really eye-opening, even though they're difficult to have. And it can feel empowering for students to be able to engage more critically with that.
Mm-hmm. It's yeah, it's one of those things of like learning to sit in the uncomfortable, right? And learning to sit
Mm-hmm.
in the like you are sometimes and the places you're from and the countries that you have been raised to be very proud of, because Britain, where I was born and raised, has its fair share of questionable practices, and especially in science and these things where like, yeah, taking students, for example, on a field course to a botanic garden and going like, why are all of the plants here named the way they are? And like when they say like, oh wow, like that guy, like he really created like what the he did this and he found this and he did that and he named this and he did that. Isn't that amazing? And you're like, okay, like that is what the narrative would want you to think about. But in this setting, we have to sit in this uncomfortability where this person who you have been taught to believe is amazing has these other aspects and has this history that overwrites a huge other story, a story that is far bigger than his. So, you know, like, yeah, sitting with that uncomfortability, and as you say, especially now, is so important. And the politics of it is so important. I wonder if there's any more there to kind of talk about. Is it something that like, because it must be challenging, right? Especially right now with the political situation that kind of the US is going through, sitting in classrooms and having those discussions must be confronting both for students and you. It must be emotional for both students and you. And these kind of things is like, we like to think that like people would choose this course because they're excited by it, but like it might be challenging. I don't know, like, has it been this kind of confronting, challenging thing, or is it like, how has that gone? And yeah.
Yeah, gosh, it's an interesting question. I think when we started planning this course, it was 2022. So this is now our third year teaching it. And I think when we were starting, we definitely felt like there were a lot of themes that the course could cover that we had felt were missing for our own undergraduate science educations. I think a lot of the topics that we cover are typically left to humanities departments to cover, and that frustrates us in a lot of ways because they really do affect science and the experience of being a scientist as well. So it was really important to us at that point to try and like force those conversations into an undergraduate curriculum in our department. Um, I think that holds true, but it's also been shifting, especially over the last year, emotionally in a lot of ways, as we've been seeing a lot of recent anti-queer and anti-diversity and anti-science rhetoric coming out in really scary ways in the US. And I think while we're in a bit of a sort of liberal bubble in Santa Cruz, and we're lucky to be able to continue teaching this course and have been able to get it off the ground here, I think we're super aware, especially now, that that's far from the case everywhere. So I think it's really important to me and Allison both to do what we can with the opportunity that we do have to empower the next generation of queer scientists, assuming that folks are going to end up all over the world and all over the country moving forward. I think being able to have the opportunity here to have those conversations really early in folks' careers can hopefully help empower queer folks to choose careers in our field and then set them up with the support they need to thrive in them and make them better for folks moving forward.
Yeah. And one thing we're trying to do is publish our curriculum as an open source thing so that anyone at any, you know, any institution could take it and teach it themselves and kind of have access to all of these different perspectives on queer ecology. So that's something that we're working on going forward is a Queer Ecology's open source curriculum that people can take and innovate on and change. I'm sure it will change as times change. But yeah, that's our kind of our next goal.
Mhm. That's amazing, and I think that's the nice thing about like. I feel like sometimes there's these silos that people work in academic spaces a lot of the time where it's like I did this and this is my course and this is my baby and it has to be taught in this way and I don't like to it's these readings and these things and these it's so nice and very refreshing to hear like someone go, well actually this is bigger than like this one course. This could be something that lots of people could benefit from, even if they couldn't necessarily, even if they aren't in the university with you, like there's something that like this can be transferred across. I think that's a very important, a really like refreshing and nice thing to hear. So like, yeah, thank you for doing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I mean, we are not the first people to have this idea, but I think we had the privilege of having like a little bit of time and space to develop it. So I think for me, it's a way to give back and kind of give all of the other people who I know are thinking about this and I know want to talk about this, give them a little bit of a a little bit of structure to get started so that more of us can engage with that kind of thing.
Yeah. And making sure that the course doesn't die when we finish our PhDs means a lot to us too. Being able to like let it live on and reduce the barrier to other people teaching us would be really exciting to be able to watch happen.
Yeah, and I think that's a general like beyond even this topic, right? That's something that like as in terms of like the impact work that I study, I'm always like these people who work for organizations and do amazing things and create amazing impact, what happens when they go or they retire or they move to another institution or they decide that they want to go and work in a bank because they don't want to work in this field anymore because they want something else? Like what happens, right? Like what happens to that knowledge and those things unless they've kind of built these collaborations and kind of written everything down and handed it over? But even then, is there the right person to hand it over? Like, yeah, future proofing that is a very a fantastic thing to have done. That's amazing. I guess like the time is flying by and it's really making me sad because I feel like there's so many more questions that I could ask each of you about all of these things. But I'm conscious that time is moving on. And I think actually, like, what is quite nice is like I'm asking the same questions to all of my guests this series, the same last three questions, because it's always interesting to see how they go in different directions and the different answers they give. And I think this first question actually kind of relates quite nicely to something we were just kind of talking about. And the question is like, what would you say to people who feel like they don't quite belong in this space, right? What do they, if someone is going, well, this doesn't, that I don't belong in this space. I don't belong in either academic spaces or these nature spaces. Like, I can't see myself here. What would you say to somebody who's listening to this, who's thinking, yeah, I don't belong? What would your message be?
Gosh, there's so much I would want to say. Think about what comes to mind first, I think, is that like absolutely understand that feeling. I think as we've been talking about in this episode, there's a lot of history to overcome to feel like we belong here. Um, But I think as we're talking about like identity and bias and how that intersects with the science we do, it's important to think about the fact that like conservation and science issues affect people alongside the environment, and to solve those issues in ways that support the interconnected whole. The people making the decisions about conservation in the world need to be representative of the people affected by them. And people are inherently biased, and that's a good thing in a lot of ways. I think caring is the fuel that moves us forward. Um, but also, if the group of decision makers is itself unrepresentative of the population affected by the decision, we can't imagine those decisions will be as good. So I think that like that's my fuel, and that's like my kind of anger point of we need to be here in order to make sure that those decisions are the right ones and that like we're handling science and doing the right conservation well. And our being here will also make that space better for a few future generations of folks like us. And I think like doing what I can through my work to make sure that that path is better laid for the folks that come after me has um, been a huge fuel to me. So I think finding ways through your work to kind of engage with that community really actively is a big way, I think, to find that community.
That's amazing. And
Yeah.
Allison?
Yeah, there's this quote from Cruising Utopia by Jose Munoz that I think about all the time that starts with queerness is not yet here. And I think about that all the time because I love the idea that queerness is a beacon that we're striving towards. It's something that we don't have yet, but something that we could have. And so, if, like Aspen said, if you feel like you don't belong in those systems, I completely get that. And while I do think it's worthwhile to join those systems and try to change them and do all of that, it does take time and energy and resources. And it's also just as beautiful to imagine new spaces and new foundations. And so just know that if you feel like you don't belong, that there are many of us who are out there who are either just striving towards that queer future in some way. So come and find us. We're trying to build something either within what's existing or completely outside of it. And I think engaging with that is really rewarding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And the nice thing is, I feel like whenever you find those spaces, everyone is always so welcoming and so warm and so kind and so excited to chat about whatever they've been up to and what they're doing, as evidenced by the open sourceness of the course potentially in the future. Like, everybody just wants to talk about what they're doing and welcome more people in and create that space for more people. So yeah, those are both, I think, some really nice, hopeful messages, I think, and really good, positive, correct messages. That's fantastic, really fantastic. And to move, I mean, I almost want to, I'm like, that's a perfect ending, but I'm not going to end there because I have two more questions for you. The most important question, of course, of all of this, we've inspired people. Now we can talk about it can go into something like really specific and weird if you wanted to, which is, what is your favorite underappreciated species? I ask everybody. I want to know what, like, and I know we've already got elephant seals and seabirds mentioned. So, but we might have to, I don't know if they're going to be the picks or whether they're kind of we're going to stick with them. If we're going to change around, what are we going to be doing? I don't know what. And when there's always two guests, I always like it because there's a slight competition. I can always see a slight competition in people's eyes of like, who's going to pick the weirder, more underappreciated thing. So yeah, I don't know. Aspen, do you want to go first? What would you say is the most underappreciated creature that you've encountered?
Oh gosh, I don't know if it's most, but I think a pretty universally hated one that I've spent a lot of time with is seagulls, or gulls generally. People just they can't stomach them for some reason, and I get it. Like they're really loud and aggressive and chaotic, and I've spent a lot of time getting pooped on and beaten over the head by them. But I think they're also like spending a lot of time in those colonies. They're so intelligent and they have a huge amount of personality. And they've also been a really important part of the history of the public perception of queerness. There's a really cool Radiolab podcast from a couple of years ago on lesbian gull pairs here in California that I'd encourage folks to check out if they're looking for more cool queer ecology stories.
Mm-hmm. That's I also I really like gulls, and I think it's maybe a universal bird issue of like, it's the one time where I sound semi-intelligent when it comes to birds, because sometimes I really don't get them, but gulls, it's literally just whatever part of them is a slightly different color, that's probably the name. So you feel like the black-headed gull and this gull and that gull. I'm like, I'm a birder, guys. I'm an expert. That's just what it is. So yeah, no, that is a good. It's a good shout. It's a good shout. And yeah, I can see underappreciated maybe. I mean, hated for a reason, because yeah, they do poo, but they are far more than that. Go and and listen to that podcast series.
Yeah.
Once you've listened to the whole of Pangolin Pride, go and listen to that podcast series, and then I feel like you'll gain a new appreciation for it. I don't know, Allison. Can we match? I don't want to say beat. Can we match seagulls?
I don't know. So yeah, I think this is a really great question, especially because one of the themes that comes up in our course is how underappreciated and vilified species kind of get adopted into the queer canon a lot of times. So it's like all of the pests or like the scary animals kind of get adopted by queer people sometimes. So like scorpions and snakes and
Mhm.
rats and spiders and frogs and all of that kind of stuff. So I love that. But I think today I'm gonna go with pigeons. I also picked a bird. And I don't have as good of a reason. I just think that they're pretty. And we should appreciate how pretty they are more often.
Love that.
I think that's fair, because they're all around us. There's something that they're a piece of nature we can take in every day, no matter where we are, even if they're kind of being kind of annoying and also pooping on us. It's a very there's a very if you're at the beach risk and in the city risk, we've covered them both. No, that's fantastic. And just on the this came up last series as well, and I can't remember the insect that we talked about, but it was one of the guests, Ali, was talking about growing up in New Zealand and these kind of like bizarre, wonderful insects and creatures that you would find. And I remember the discussion we had was like, yeah, queer people adopt these things, but queer people also have exceptional taste. And that's because, so you should love all of those things because they are fantastic. And yeah, they're incredible. No, that's amazing. And yeah, that's a wonderful, wonderful choice. No, that is brilliant. And then I guess like the final question is, you have both done incredible, amazing things. You are both doing incredible, amazing things. And so the final question, and it makes me very sad to ask it because it means that we're coming to an end, but the final question is, if people want to kind of learn more about what you're doing or kind of keep up to date with either the work that you're doing or publication, whatever it is, I don't know, people point people in. Now that social media is all over the place and we don't know where to use, people point 1,000 different directions. So where would you like to, is there somewhere where people can keep up to date with your work?
Yeah, for me, the best place is my website, which is allisonpayne.github.io. And please do reach out if you're interested in queer ecology, or if you want to teach the course at your university or somewhere. I would be super, super happy to chat with anyone who's interested.
And my website as well has all of my contact info on there, and would love to hear from you. My website is Borealis, BORIELLIS, at github.io. And you can also find me at Borealis on X and Blue Sky, though I post every 6 months when a paper comes out, and that's about it. So if you want to hear about that, give me a follow there.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think it was one of those ones where last year when Twitter disappeared into whatever, and I stopped using it as regularly, and I went, oh, my life is so much better now. I'll just like, I don't have to post on it. Like, I'm not like, oh, I don't need to go back. I'll post pretty pictures on Instagram and I'll maybe pop up everywhere else every so often. But yeah, no, that's
Exactly.
Okay, perfect. And for anyone listening, I'll put links to all of that in the description of the episode. So like, yeah, if you go down there, there will be links to the podcast that we chatted about. I'll put links to kind of resources for the both of you, and yeah, if there's a website or something for the course as well, I'll try and pop that in as well so people can try and learn more. But yeah, I'll also, of course, shameless promotion. Of course, I'll also post all of the links to our social media. We're at Pangolin Podcast on everywhere. And yeah, throughout the month of June, we'll be posting all about the incredible Pride Month episodes that we're doing, all kinds of interesting content to do with all of these things. So go and follow us on all of those, subscribe to the podcast, leave us a nice review, and make sure to come back because next week we are going to be joined by Rory Alexander, who is a volunteer for the Royal Zoological Society of Scotland, who is, amazing. And they are talking about how they balance, they are also researching cancer, but they're talking about how they balance doing an MRes in kind of cancer research and bringing conservation into their life. And I think that's a really important conversation, especially back to the link of the start of this podcast where we talked about, making choices that are healthy for ourselves. How do they balance that? And it's really interesting. So make sure and come back for that. Having said that, all I have to say now is, of course, a huge thank you to the listeners for tuning in, and to Aspen and Allison, thank you so much for being here. It's been incredibly inspirational, incredibly interesting, and I can't wait to, even if I can't find a way to use it in the immediate, do find the course eventually online and do it online just for me, and then I'll find a way to teach it somewhere. So thank you so much for being here. It's been absolutely fantastic.
Thanks so much for having us. It's been a blast.
Thank you. No, and yeah, I guess until next time, thank you all again so much for listening, and goodbye.